to, I guess, observe injuries on bone that would have been caused by sharp force trauma.
Yes.
And before we get into that, can you first describe or explain what does it mean, sharp force trauma?
Means injuries caused by a sharp cutting instrument like a knife.
And so then of those 9,000 or so autopsies that you have performed, have you had many instances where you would have observed a sharp force trauma on bone?
Yes, this include not necessarily only the bone fragments or the skeletal remains, but in doing a regular autopsy, once we remove the tissues and muscles, and if there are injuries, we examine those injuries in the bone as well. So
okay, so I think I might have misspoke. So you've observed tissue or, for the lack of a better term, damage to a human flesh or tissue with sharp force trauma in addition to bone damage.
or lots, yes,
And when you say lots, is there around
hundreds.
And pursuant to your experience, your expertise, your training, and your education, are you able to identify sharp force trauma in tissue as well as in bone?
Yes.
And basically, can you tell us what are you looking at when you identify sharp force trauma?
We look at the injury features. For instance, if it is a cut on the bone, or even in tissues, first we have to determine, are these incise wounds, means a cut, or are they stabs where the depth is longer than the surface area. So that's including mostly tissues. But on the bones, they are usually cuts majority of the times. And then we look at the edges, the sharp edges that cuts and creates like almost like a V shape with these sharp cutting edges. Then if it's other fractures, are these consistent with a blunt force injury from the jagged edge of the edges of the fractures. So it depends, and mostly, like I said, it's the type of injury and the features of the injury.
And Dr. Diallos, have you come across injuries to bone that would have been caused by a serrated edge or a sharp instrument with a serrated edge?
Yes.
And is that distinguishable from a sharp force injury created by a smooth edge? And we're again talking about bone.
Yes, if it is scraped on the surface, yes.
Okay, can you describe the difference?
So a serrated knife can cut it at this direction, or it can get scraped. If it gets scraped, yes, we can see the distinguishing characteristics of the serration when it gets scraped versus when it cuts. Because when it cuts, it's a sharp cut.
And in addition to, well, you described the cut and the scrape. And then just for the record, when you say cut, and I just need to make a record with the reporter, you made an up and down motion with your palm point perpendicular with the, I guess, backside of your hand. Is that correct?
Yes, whether it is at an angle or perpendicular to the surface of the bone versus being scraped by the serrated edge of a knife against the surface of the bone.
Now, are you also familiar in your experience with having observed hundreds of, I guess, sharp force trauma to bone, are you familiar with with an injury that would be, I guess, similar to a sawing effect using a serrated blade or serrated edge? When I say sawing effect, I mean going back and forth.
Yes, but that's the one that I described, that it may not necessarily leave the serrated marks if it goes cutting in a cutting motion back and forth versus being scraped.
All right. And in addition to those injuries, I think that you might have testified this morning, is part of your responsibilities or duties as a medical examiner or forensic pathologist to determine whether injuries to a human body or even skeletal remains would have been caused by animal or by another human?
Well, when we receive when we receive skeletal remains, that's something we try to identify. If there are marks on the surface of the bone, then we try to identify whether these are consistent with actual sharp force injury or blunt force trauma versus scavenged by animals. And like I said, we try to make that determination initially, and then we send those for confirmation and thorough analysis to a forensic anthropologist, I'm sorry.
Now, Dr. Dallas, pursuant to your experience in the field of forensic pathology, and I believe you said you had 30 plus years?
Yes.
Right. What was more common in your experience in observing injury to bone? Would it be sharp force trauma or animal damage to bone?
Objection relevance 403. We're not playing a game of odds here.
The objection is sustained.
Have you had occasion to observe animal damage to bone in your 30 plus years of experience as a forensic pathologist?
Yes.
Yeah. And approximately how many times would you have observed animal damage to bone?
I would say less than 5 times.
And this is all here in the state of Hawaii?
Yes.
Among the animal damage that you would have observed on bone, were any of them boar or pig damage?
Probably about 1 or 2.
When you say 1 or 2, are these 1 or 2 separate cases?
Yes.
And as you sit there right now, are you able to name those cases? I know you said you had 9,000. Are you able to pick those ones out?
No.
But do you recall the characteristics of the pig or boar damage you would have observed on human bone?
Yeah, that's something that we had to have knowledge of when we were examining. So it was from our reading and looking at pictures and the basic knowledge, yes, I had in trying to distinguish what kind of marks that the animals would make, whether they are punctures, dogs make punches, boars can make scoring kind of marks or furrowing, and those are things that I had to have knowledge of in examining, although, like I said, once we identify the actual injury by an instrument versus consistent with scavenging by animals, we would send those out to the anthropologist.
Would you first try to make your determination before sending it out to the anthropologist?
Objection leading?
No, this is a foundation question.
Yes.
The objection is overruled.
And the answer is yes.
Yes, like I said, we first examine and we make our own examination, describe the injuries, make a determination as to what we think injuries are, especially having done lots of autopsies with cuts and knife marks and incised wounds. Those are things that we compare. You have to have something to compare the knowledge of having seen these sharp force injuries or blunt force injuries, and then to compare and see, are these marks consistent with having been inflicted by an instrument versus an animal.
And were Dr. Dial, was to distinguish animal injuries, and let's focus specifically on boar or pig versus sharp force trauma to human bone. Do you understand my question?
Yes, I do. You're asking me in my own experience?
No, well, when the one or two cases you had with respect to, would you describe it as boar injuries or damage to human bone? Were you able to distinguish that from sharp force trauma, for example, with a knife causing injury to bone?
So I'm going to object. She testified that she didn't recall the case.
You know, she testified she doesn't recall the name of the case of the 9,000, but she recalls an image and what she observed.
The word name of the case never came out of that witness. She doesn't recall the case.
Let's clarify that.
Okay. Do you remember the name of the case?
No.
Okay. Do you remember the observations you made regarding the case, the one or two cases involving boar or pig?
Yes, I have that visual image.
And so
The objection is overruled.
thank you, Your Honor. So my question, Dr. Diaz, were you able to make or distinguish the difference between the injuries caused by a boar or pig versus the injuries caused by a sharp force trauma like a knife?
Yes.
Was that difficult for you to do?
No, the scoring in that particular case showed more of a superficial, multiple, curvy, linear kind of marks, lots of marks, versus a cut with the sharp edges that cut through the bone. So, like I said, that's the visual picture that I have, and that is not only from that one or two cases, but from the general knowledge that we had to keep up with, reading and looking at pictures and to distinguish when we did get those cases. Yes.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I think the record should reflect that while she was testifying, she was describing the marks of cuts, and her motion was this right here, which would be a literal V with two sides coming down to a point, not just one side. And I would ask that the record reflect that.
Judge, I'm not sure at which point counsel is referring to or the V shape. I did not see Dr. Diaz make a V shape with her hand.
You can ask her.
Let's do this. Let's have it done at a time when it's clear that the idea is to, or the purpose of the question and the answer and the demonstration is to, in fact, be specific about the shape.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I would object to that, in as much as that was probably the most honest representation that's going to come out when it was subconsciously done.
Judge,
And she did it without even thinking.
Judge,
I'm just asking that
counsel.
the record
No.
reflect that.
I object to counsel argument.
I've ruled. Let's
Thank
move
you.
on.
Okay, we can move on. Dr. Diaz, in this particular case that you're being called to testify here today, which materials did you review in preparation for your testimony before us here?
Dr. Lindsay Hall's autopsy report, the death certificate that she filed, anthropology report from JPAC by Dr. Taylor, and the photographs that accompanied that report, and some other photographs that were taken at the autopsy. And there were some photographs of clothing items. Yes.
Okay. And in addition to the photographs and the two reports that you've mentioned, did you review or have a chance to make observations of any of the physical evidence in this case?
Yes.
And can you please tell us what those items are?
I examined both sides of the mandible and also blue jeans.
And with respect to both sides of the mandible, did you physically handle the mandible yourself?
I did with gloves.
And did you use anything to assist you if you needed to take a closer look at any parts of the mandible?
Yes, I wanted the magnifying glass, so I examined those cuts with the magnifying glass.
And without telling us what the substance of Dr. Taylor's report, what it consisted of, or what the substance of it was, can you tell us, other than writing of the reports, did it consist of anything else? Dr. Taylor's reports from JPAC. Other than the writing, did it consist of anything else?
Pictures,
And did you have a chance to review the pictures from Dr. Taylor's reports?
yes.
Now, I want to show you a photograph that has been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 410. I got a permission to publish it this time. Yes?
The permission is granted. Proceed. If it's in evidence, you may publish it.
Okay, thank you.
Your Honor, I'm actually going to have the record reflect that the court was sleeping right there and woke up.
I'm reading the computer.
Your Honor, I'm going to have the record reflect.
I'm sorry, you're dead wrong.
I think the jury could see what was happening.
That is not true. I was reading the computer. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a monitor in front of me, and I read it, and that's why I can follow the examination of the witnesses. I was reading what was being said, and I was checking my notes because I have outlined the areas of examination that were permissible. And I was going between my tablet here with an outline of what I've ruled on today, this morning, and my transcript. I'm sorry, Mr. Opal, you're dead wrong. All right, let's proceed.
Thank you. And your may Dr. Gale step on and approach the large monitor.
Yes.
And using the pointer as well. Okay, Dr. Gale, there's a pointer right behind you against the wall. Now, if you could stand more to the right of the monitor so we're not blocking the view of the ladies and gentlemen on the end of the jury box. Thank you. When you first received Dr. Taylor's report, did you have a chance to review this photograph?
Yes.
Okay. And when you said you had a chance to physically, I guess, handle as well as observe the mandible in this case, is the right part of the mandible depicted in State's Exhibit 410?
Yes.
Now, I want to turn your attention to the middle of the photograph. There are 4, I guess, linear marks in the middle of the right mandible. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Going towards, if we were to number the 4 marks, 1, 2, 3, and 4, 1 being the mark farthest to the left, and 4 being the mark farthest to the right. Do you understand the markings?
Yes.
If we were to mark it that way.
Yes.
Now, I want to turn your attention to the 4th linear mark that's shown in the middle of the chalkboard.
Yes, I see that.
All right. Now, looking at this photograph, do you have an opinion as to what would have created or caused that linear mark?
In my opinion, these marks are consistent with a sharp cutting instrument having cut through the bone.
Okay. And with respect to mark number 4, how is it that you're able to say that?
Just from this photograph, did you mean, or from having examined?
Or from the photograph as well as having examined the physical mandible itself?
Because it appears to be a cut
Okay. And
with a sharp edge.
okay, and let me, the record should reflect that you started from the bottom of what is depicted, what we have indicated as linear cut number 4, from the bottom of that cut all the way up to the top of the right mandible. Is that correct?
Yes, but there's an area that's not shown here. However, it seems like that cut, this cut continues up.
Okay. Now, is there another photograph that you're aware of that would corroborate what you just mentioned?
Yes.
I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you what is also an evidence, the State Exhibit 232. And 232 is on the screen. It's on the right side, the right photograph, and Exhibit 410 is on the left portion of the screen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, is it yours? Are these the same two pieces of the right side of the mandible that we're looking at?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm going to focus now on State's Exhibit 232. Is that, are you able to see clearly with that being enlarged?
Yes.
Okay, now you testified that there was you testified that the cut line with the right side of the mandible in State's Exhibit 410 went from the bottom of the linear cut 4 all the way to the top of the mandible, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, is that depicted here in this exhibit, is it?
Yes.
Okay, can you show that cut line using the
The
pointer?
picture before was after this tissue had been removed. So when I examined this photograph, in my opinion, this cut continues. As you can see here, the tissues are all dried and shriveled up, but there's a faint mark of this cut that continues.
Okay.
So right here. And in the other picture, I look to see where the tooth, because one tooth has fallen when that other picture was taken, but it goes right between the same tooth that we could show in the other picture. So
Okay.
the
Doctor,
this
let me
mark
bring up
continues.
let me bring up the other picture for you that you're referring to, and that would be State's Exhibit 410. Okay, are the, does that help, okay, using these two photographs, does that help you, does it
Yes.
show what you're
So
talking
this
about?
tooth that is shown here is the same tooth as
Okay.
this one.
And let me make a record of that, because you're pointing to, you first pointed to State's Exhibit 410, and which tooth did you point to?
This tooth, the one that's completely shown to the right of the
Okay.
photograph.
All right,
And that tooth corresponds to the tooth that's shown on this photograph,
in Exhibit 232.
exhibit 232.
Okay, and you're
And-
pointing to the
And then,
third tooth from the right, is that
yeah,
correct?
this is the third tooth from the right, and that corresponds to the third tooth from the right here.
Okay, I think the fourth tooth from the right,
Fourth, yes, on that picture, yes.
in State's Exhibit 232.
Correct. But this is an enlarged picture, so the one tooth that has fallen is the tooth that's
Fifth tooth?
fifth tooth from the right. And this mark, this linear mark, that is consistent with a cut, in my opinion, extends adjacent to, a little bit away from that tooth. And this is right next to the number 5 tooth that has fallen off.
Okay. Okay, yeah, please have a seat. Now, turning your attention back to State's Exhibit 410. You testified earlier that the 1 or 2 cases involving boar or pig that you did observe, and you mentioned score marks. Do you know any scoring marks or pit marking on the right mandible?
No, Jack Black Foundation.
You know,
Did you have a response? Oh,
Yes.
it's okay if you don't.
Okay.
I sound like you were going to say something, so. All right. The objection is overruled. Proceed.
okay, thank you. You can answer that. And do you need to step down and?
No, I did not see. The marks that I described as core marks, which are multiple curvy linear marks, I did not see those in this
Sure,
mandible.
I'm going to object. I thought the court's ruling was that unqualified.
The court did rule that, huh?
Excuse me.
Going boar?
I'm going to sustain the objection. Proceed.
Move to strike the answer.
Granted.
Your Honor, the term boar and pig has been used interchangeably throughout the 104 hearing as well as throughout this proceeding.
And there was a ruling effective on both.
Why don't you rephrase your question and let me hear what what it is you're attempting to elicit.
And whether or not the scoring that she observed from the boar or pig marks of the 1 or 2 cases that she recalls are similar to any of the marks that she sees here in State's Exhibit 410.
Court made a clear ruling relative to boar testimony.
You know, counsel even used the word boar.
I'll overrule the objection.
Thank
Proceed.
you. Okay, Dr. Yelsey, you can answer the question. I can repeat it if you want me to.
I did not see those scoring marks consistent with scavenging by a boar or pig in this mandible that I examined.
Move to objection unresponsive. She was asked to compare to her case.
Your Honor, she answered the question exactly. when I asked.
The objection is overruled. Proceed.
Thank you. Okay, no, you testified earlier, Doctor, that you did have a chance to review, I guess, observe and handle the right mandible. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's the question in this case.
Yes.
Using the right mandible, would you be able to describe, other than the photographs there, would you be able to show us the slice mark in the linear cut number 4?
Yes.
Your head coach, Dr. Jarvis.
Yes. Yeah, proceed.
Okay, Dr. Jarvis, I'm sure you're...
I'm going to object. It's beyond the scope of what was ruled admissible. It's cumulative. It's on top of that.
Judge, we're also going to get into the other area of the courts along the court to talk about, which is...
It appears that you're doing what consistent with what I ruled on already, but I'll have to see how it develops. I'm not sure what you're going to do right now. Proceed.
Thank you. And Dr. Slip has a pair of gloves. Now, using pen, if you can step right in front of the ladies and gentlemen so they can see what you're referring to, can you show them the 4th linear mark that is depicted on the actual mandible itself?
This is the 4th mark that we this right here.
And if we move down to the side.
This mark.
Now, as you're holding that piece of mandible, okay. Now, as you're handling that piece of mandible, I want to refer you to the, I guess is the anterior mean rear? Is that? in the back?
Posterior.
Oh, posterior, okay, the posterior portion of the mandible below where the ramus would be.
Yes.
Yeah, there's, do you notice any abnormality in that area?
Yes.
Okay.
There's we have the magnifying glass. So this area here onto my right side is the ramus area. So below that, there's a
Someone
roughly
object as being inconsistent with the court's rule,
Judge, we're addressing the area where the court has allowed the,
getting into the anatomy of jawbone.
she has to familiarize the jury with what she's indicating,
Is this leading to,
the flesh removal portion.
if it's what we talked about yesterday, it would not be, it would not fall within the scope of the court's ruling. If it relates to a bite, whether or not there's a bite mark, I'll allow it. It depends. So
Okay, yes, Your Honor.
if it's
The state understands.
removal of flesh, then that versus bone, that we've already covered that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, going to just that area, my question to you is, does that appear to be, and again, did you finish describing that particular area? Okay, can you finish describing that particular area, and then I'll ask a question about that.
that area is roughly kind of rectangular shape coming from my right to the left. That's the area that we are referring to here. Right here. It was shown on the photograph.
Okay, and I'm going to put that photograph up for you.
and then on the bone it's clear that way.
Okay. I'm showing you State's Exhibit 410.
This is the area that we are referring to.
Okay. Now, that specific area, for the record, you're pointing to what portion of the right mandible that would be in the posterior, under where the ramus would be?
Yes.
Okay. Now, that...
So to the left of the screen, there's an area here that's different from the remainder of the surface area of the bone, which looks like markings against the surface of the bone.
Now, Dr. Diaz, in your opinion, do you consider that to be markings from an animal or a sharp force instrument?
Well, again, in my opinion, it's consistent with a serrated instrument drawn against the bone than the scoring by an animal.
Okay, next, you testified earlier that one of the other items that you had an opportunity to make a physical observation of it in addition to looking at photographs was a pair of blue jeans, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, with respect to the pair of blue jeans, well, before I ask you about that, in your training, experience, and education as a board-certified forensic pathologist, do you have occasion to come across blood-like patterns on fabric?
Yes.
Is that common or uncommon?
It's common because usually the clothes accompany the bodies that we examine. So as part of that examination, we examine the clothes. Again, my specialty is not in blood stain analysis, but as a forensic pathologist, one has to have a general idea of what we are looking at.
And when you say a general idea, would you look specifically at blood patterns, if there are any, and if you're able to, I guess, provide an opinion as to the shape or form of a pattern? Is that part of what forensic pathologists would do?
Yes, it depends on the item, yes.
Now, I'm going to show you a photograph of the pair of blue jeans that you testified about.
And I'm going to object to a lack of foundation. It's our opinion.
The objection is overruled.
Okay, I'm first going to show you what's in evidence as State's Exhibit 258. And did you have a chance to view this photograph?
Yes.
And turning your attention to what appears to be a blood-like stain to the right outer thigh area of the pair of blue jeans, did you take note of that?
Yes.
And I'm going to show you State's exhibit, another exhibit right next to there. And I'm going to blow both of them up so you can see. Okay, now doctor, in reviewing the pictures as well as after looking at the pants itself, were you able to form an opinion as to what would have caused the shape of the blood-like stain that's depicted in both of those photographs that's located to the outer right thigh area of the pair of blue jeans?
Yes, as a forensic pathologist, my examination was, as I said, in general, looking at stains and trying to determine what is consistent with that. If you look at this photograph that's to the right side of the screen, you see the outer side of blue jeans with a lot of folds. So it shows even from top area here. So my opinion is that this stain that looks like blood and the area that's between the two stains is consistent with the fold of the fabric where the blood did not come in contact with because of the fold.
Okay, I'm going to show you another photograph that's on the same angle of the pair of blue jeans. And showing you State's Exhibit 267 side by side with 121, and we'll publish it right now. Okay, that State's Exhibit 257 and 121 is shown on the screen right here. Now you mentioned that there are folds on the right photograph of the screen. Is that correct?
Yes, and that left side is little, at least in the photograph, it's flattened, and this to the right side you see some folds, and then you see this blood appearing stain, and then you see empty blank areas with no blood stains. And when we usually examine clothing that comes with our bodies, when we examine whether it's motor vehicle accidents or anything else that has blood on clothing, that's what one sees when there are folds. You may see these areas with no blood, just like what you see in this picture too. Here, here, here.
Now, the particular, do you see any shapes in this pair of jeans? I'm speaking to the, it's the same pair, but turn your attention to the photograph to the right of the screen. Do you see any pattern there that would, where you would have an opinion that could be a condom?
Not in my opinion, because this shows a lot of folds, and this is consistent. If you just look at just this area, and if you...
Okay, and just for the record, you're indicating, again, to the right photograph, you're indicating to the area of the, I guess, blood stain, where there's a large area where there's no blood. Is that correct?
Correct. Since you mentioned a condom, and if you look at just this area and you think of that shape, just because that shape is there, that doesn't mean that we would interpret as a condom, because there are folds, and you look at the whole area, you look at the rest of the area, you look at this picture which was taken before it was flattened, and by looking at the entire area, it's always you take it in totality and then see what is most consistent with folds.
Okay, please have a seat. Now, Dr. Diallos, all that you just testified to, is that to a reasonable degree of forensic pathological certainty?
Correct.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Cross-examination, Mr. Ripple.
So let me just start off by asking you this, doctor. So relative to your testimony and your opinion about these folds, being the cause of that place where there's no blood on it, I take it that it would be your opinion that the blood came... Well, let me ask you this. In your opinion, was the pants folded before or after the blood got on there then?
It was folded when the blood got on, and that area that doesn't have the blood has been folded.
Okay, so was it folded and then blood went on it? Or was blood already on the pants and then it was folded?
No, that area had folds before the blood got in there.
So somehow the jeans were folded before the blood got on the jeans, then, would be your opinion, right?
No, when you say folded, I'm not saying it was folded like this.
Right. Well, let's say it was folded however you say it was folded. How would you say it was folded?
Because this is what I've seen.
No, I'm asking you, how do you think it was folded? Not in what manner it was folded. In what did it look like folded?
Folds in the clothing has folds, not completely folded. What I meant, if you look at that picture, if it's still up there, you see folds, and that's what I meant.
Okay, so can we agree then that we're talking about the pants in a condition when it's not being worn by somebody, because if it's worn by somebody, it's not folded, right?
Then it may not have as folds, depending on the position of the person. If you're standing erect versus if you are kneeling down, you may have folds. So we cannot generalize the way you are describing, because right now you're standing, but you still have some folds I can see in front.
Okay, so let's focus on that. Let's refine your opinion. Okay, because I'm standing up right now, right? And you'd agree with me that, relatively speaking, there's no folds in my pants down the legs, right?
Yeah, that's because you're standing.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Is it your opinion that someone was wearing those pants when that blood got on it?
Judge, objection. This goes well beyond the scope.
What's beyond the scope of it?
Okay, I will rule the objection. You may answer the question.
No, I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that particular stain, the appearance is consistent with having had a fold in that area where there's no blood. But I'm not saying whether it was worn at the time or whether it wasn't, and if it was worn, was the person standing or was the person on the ground or in other position where the pants can get folds. But I'm not referring to as taking the pants and folding like laundry folding.
I mean, can we agree that you're not talking about the pants being in the position as it is right now and then blood going on it, right?
Can you say right now, because there are few folds
Okay, I'm asking you.
So can you be more
These folds
specific?
right here,
Mhm.
would it be consistent with your opinion about those genes?
So can you come so I can show you?
Absolutely.
So just stay where you have the folds. So let's say if the blood drop comes and you have a fold here, okay? So this blood may come here and it may drip here, but this area where you have this fold will not show blood, even in this standing position. So let's say if you are in a different position where the pants get folded, the same thing applies. But look at right now, it looks like a condom here, the same shape. See, right here.
Ma'am.
That's what we saw.
So your testimony is that it should, if there was blood basically put here, when someone's standing up like me, there should be a mark over here then?
No, if there was a blood that splashed here, while you have a fold here, look at this fold. Towards the middle, the fold is narrower. Towards the outer part, the fold is wider.
Okay, let's be clear.
Yeah.
You're saying that
Judge,
if blood goes right here,
Counsel's arguing, let's be clear, she's not being unclear.
I'll overrule the objection. Proceed.
let's be clear what you're saying. The implications of what you're saying here, right? Is that you're saying that just because there's a fold here, that there's not going to be any blood in here?
Just do like what you
No, let's over-exaggerate and actually
No,
make
it's
the
not
fold.
over-exaggeration. Because, let's assume, this is hypothetically, you're assuming, however, I'm not, because I cannot say whether a person was standing erect with pants on when that blood got in, if it is blood. Because I said I didn't examine the blood, I'm saying that it looks like a blood stain. So I'm not assuming any of those. I'm only examining a piece of cloth and trying to explain to you how one can get a pattern that is consistent. So
No, hold on. I'm asking a
Let her
question.
finish your answer.
so the same way, look at this fold here. These are the kind of folds that I'm talking about. It could be a little bit exaggerated, but right now if you're not erect, let's say if you go a
I said I
little,
bend down.
yeah, then there'll be more folds.
Okay.
So the same way, so it depends on, all I'm saying is that blood, assuming it's blood, when it got deposited, the reason you see an area of no blood is because there was some fold right there. And that fold can look like what we described. If you just look at the folds that he has, look at those, how the folds take the shape of a condom.
Okay. So you re-described what you testified to in direct. My question to you was ultimately, is it your opinion that someone was standing up wearing those pants when the blood got on it?
Judge, objection, she
Simple
answered
question.
that, Your Honor. It's not a simple question. She said she could not
The
defend.
objection is sustained.
Thank you.
So your answer is you don't know, right?
Objection, Your Honor. He's asking the same question.
The objection is sustained.
Thank you.
I don't know what her answer was other than what counsel just shouted in my ear. I'm trying to get
Maybe
from
I'm
her
going
what
to
her
shout about it
ultimate...
because he's asking the same question over and over again.
I'm just trying to find out what her ultimate answer is, whether she has an opinion as to whether the person was wearing the jeans or not.
Respectfully, in the court's view, that question has been answered quite thoroughly by the witness.
Thank you.
And that answer is that it depends?
Judge, ask the
Let's
answer.
move on to the next question. I have ruled.
Okay. So let me step way back here. And, you testified that you became a certified pathologist back when?
1984.
And actually, let me cut to the chase here. You testified that in terms of examining bones, your typical protocol is that you will examine the bones up to the point where you can distinguish whether it's animal versus human or whether they're commingled or not, right?
No, beyond that too, I testified beyond that also.
At some point, though, you'd agree with me that you defer to JPAC by sending the items to JPAC, right?
After we examine and note all the injuries, if there are any, and then we defer to JPAC.
Okay, and I guess, have you ever worked with a Dr. Pasaqua over at JPAC? A forensic anthropologist?
I don't have an independent recollection of that name.
But your testimony would be that you defer to the experts at JPAC who typically include forensic anthropologists, correct?
Correct.
And so if we had a forensic anthropologist here that worked at JPAC and we've had another one who currently works at JPAC, those are the people you're referring to, right?
Judge, objection, because that calls on hearsay. That's beyond Dr. Diallis's knowledge with respect to this case, whether it's one or two are called.
The objection is sustained.
Thank you.
Did you read Dr. Rebecca Taylor's report?
Yes.
Who does she work for?
JPAC.
So she would be the type of person who you would be deferring to relative to the further analysis, right?
We give over to JPAC and they assign the forensic anthropologist who would examine, yes.
And what do you expect from that? What would you call it? A consultation or a referral? What would you call that?
Consultation.
What do you expect from those consultations?
We,
Judge, hold on. Judge, I do object as being vague and ambiguous on what you would expect.
The objection is overruled. You may answer the question.
so they examine the bones, they remove the tissues if there are tissues, that's what they're trained to do. And we don't disturb any tissues if there are any tissues attached, because we give all the bones, we examine what we can and note down injuries in the areas where visually we can see. And then they remove the tissues and they do a thorough examination after removing, and they send us a report based upon their examination, what bones they are, what kind of injuries there are, what bones are missing, just an independent examination that they do. They send us that report. So that's what we do, the same for entomology. We find maggots, we call the forensic entomologist, it's the same procedure.
Okay, so I take it that the report that you just testified about is the type of the report that you reviewed relative to Rebecca Taylor's report in this case, right?
It is that report, right?
I'm sorry?
In this case, Rebecca Taylor is the one who sent the report.
Right, and when you testified about sending consults over to JPAC and what you expect from them, you would expect a report like the one that you reviewed from Rebecca Taylor,
Judge,
right?
objection, because it's relevancy as to other cases or the reports. We're referring to just
Protocol.
referring
The
to.
objection is overruled.
It depends. You cannot, each case has to be investigated in its own merits. So I cannot say this is the report that Dr. Rebecca Taylor sent would be a similar report for something else. Maybe there's a different bone that they might examine and say there are no injuries. So it all depends. One cannot generalize. That's why I mentioned before, we take each case as it comes and take the totality of investigative information and all this other evidence and referred to the case and its own merits.
So ma'am, I take it that your protocol resembles that of Dr. Lindsay Harrell, who was the forensic pathologist in this case, whose report you testified you read. Would that be accurate?
Yes,
Okay. And the same way that Dr. Harrell sent for a consult to Rebecca Taylor regarding this jawbone, would you agree with me that if you had a similar jawbone, that would be the same type of report that you'd be asking Rebecca Taylor to do for you?
I would not tell her what kind of report to do. I will send the bones and she or he will decide how she does the report, but they will do the thorough comprehensive examination. That's what a consultation means.
Okay. And so in that regard, well, strike that. And in a circumstance like, well, strike that, let me move on. You testified that for at least a couple of decades, you worked in the Honolulu Medical Examiner's office and rose to the ranks of Chief Medical Examiner. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
I mean, just as a backdrop, can we agree that no other qualified doctor really wanted that Chief Medical Examiner's
Not
job?
objection, that calls for
It's not
speculation,
true.
it's argumentative, and it
It's not true.
assumes facts that are not even remotely in evidence.
The objection is sustained.
Thank you.
Well, ma'am, you retired in 2009, right?
Correct.
They couldn't fill that position until 2013 because no qualified person wanted that job, right?
Objection, Your Honor, same objection, that calls for pure speculation.
I would like to explain.
Oh, okay, I withdraw my objection.
Withdraw the question then.
No.
I would like to explain.
That's you.
When I applied,
So, Your Honor,
I'll ask the question if he doesn't.
that's fine, go ahead.
so it wasn't true that nobody else wanted because there was an interview process and there were two other doctors who interviewed, and Mayor Hanneman, Mayor Harris first appointed me as the chief. The reason in 2009 when I retired, why they couldn't fill the position was because the National Association of Medical Examiner, when they did the accreditation while I was still the chief, told me if I continue to work for 60% less than the salary that my colleagues were making on the mainland, that they were going to have a hard time having any equal pay from the mainland standards. So when I retired, I had to go back, because I didn't want the job, but I had to go back and get the salary increase. So it took 3 years, they had to go 3 times. So the incoming medical examiner was getting or is getting a much higher, double the pay than what I got, because I worked for 25 years and 10 years as the chief for much less pay. So there's a backstory to everything. That's the reason they couldn't fill that until the salary was doubled.
Hey, right. So nobody wanted the job because it was too low paying, right?
Just objection to the argumentative tone of his voice and the way he's right now addressing disrespectfully to Dr. Dialvis.
Doctor is smiling at me. How is that disrespectful?
Because he's
You know what,
disrespectful.
I'm going to sustain the objection. The question is asking the witness to testify about what other people want. That is
Right, and
speculative.
Objection would have been sustained, I imagine, but he got cute.
So I've ruled on it. Let's move on to the next question,
Right.
please.
Oh, he's just naturally cute. Sorry. So, doctor, after that distinguished career, you'd agree with me that you did some more autopsies, I guess, as a public servant. Would that be accurate?
No, I went back to the office on contractual basis.
Okay. And you testified that you now do consulting work, correct?
Yes.
Now, would that be in the context of a company called Forensics Hawaii?
Yes.
Can you describe what Forensics Hawaii is?
It's just a website that I myself created and put the name Forensics Hawaii.
Is this is it a non-profit organization in any way?
No, it's just an individual consulting firm. But I just gave the name and I did my own website.
Okay, so when we talk Forensics Hawaii, are there any other people associated with Forensics Hawaii other than yourself?
No, not. It's an individual. I just gave the name.
So would you agree with me that Forensics Hawaii is a for-profit sole proprietorship on your part?
I guess that's what it is because I get consulting fees
Okay.
when I get consulted and if I take the case.
May I ask what your hourly rate for consultation is?
Yes, $375 an hour.
You'd agree with me that you won't look at anything without charging 2 hours though, right?
No, I never said that. I've done for
Now-
1 hour.
That would be your hourly rate. When were you first contacted by the state or the Maui prosecutor's office to be a witness in this matter?
On last Thursday,
What is your compensation that you are being paid or expect to be paid as being a witness here?
yes, they wanted to know what my fee schedule is for out of island travel and testifying. So for a full day, $2,400.
So let me get this straight. You flew over from Honolulu this morning and got here at what time?
I left the house at 5 or 4:30, so I got here at 7:45.
Okay, so let's say to the end of the day, you're gonna make, and then you gotta flight back at what time?
5:15.
Okay, and you made a quick $20-something.
Well,
There's no objection.
for hourly
Hold
it
on,
is
I'm
less.
sorry, Doctor. I do object to the characterization of a quick 20-something.
The objection is sustained.
And move to strike that questions.
Granted, you may rephrase your question.
So for this, well, let me ask you this. How many hours did you spend prior to coming here to testify today?
2 hours.
Okay. Now, you'd agree with me that you agreed to come and testify. Well, let me ask you this. At what point did you actually enter into an agreement to come and testify for the state?
I think on Saturday or Friday afternoon, after I took a look at the records that were sent.
Had you ever seen the physical evidence prior to coming to Maui?
No,
When was the first time you saw the jawbone?
today.
At about what time?
Prior to we started testifying, I think probably between 10:30 and 11.
So the first time you even saw that physical jawbone was about 10:30 or 11 o'clock of the morning that you testified.
Your objection has been asked and answered.
The objection is sustained.
When was the first time you saw the blue jeans?
I saw the pictures, but the actual blue jeans today,
What time today did you see those blue jeans?
same time.
Now, you'd agree with me that you're not going to come all the way over here and testify differently than what you're expected to for the money that you're getting paid, right?
I testify for my time. I have never, ever testified for a testimony. That's something I've done since I have started private consulting. It is only for my time, not for a testimony.
You testified on direct that you have experience in cases involving pig or boar activity. Is that accurate?
Yes.
How many cases did you say you were involved with?
I said only 1 or 2 with pig or boar, but I have seen other animal activity like dogs in other bones. So I said only 1 and 2 that I can recall.
I mean, can we be even more accurate? When you answered on direct, can we agree that you said probably 1 or 2?
Yes.
Can we agree that at most we're talking about one?
Judge, objection, that's argumentative.
The objection is sustained.
Do you know it's two, or can it be one?
2.
Can you describe both of these cases?
Again, all I can describe, what I remember is what we looked for, the scoring. Because I remember looking at articles when we saw those marks, what they are consistent with, and to learn from the pictures that we saw, whether those were consistent with scoring and how scoring would look like. So that's what I can testify to.
Okay, so the best that you recall is looking at some pictures and comparing it to what you were looking at?
Yes?
Okay. Now let me ask you this. Do you think it takes a certified forensic pathologist to do that?
Judge, objection, that calls for speculation for anything else or for any other profession, whether or not they would be able to do that.
Certified.
The objection is overruled. You may answer the
Yes.
question.
Certified forensic pathologists are the ones who examine first skeletal remains when they are first brought to a medical examiner facility. So if other doctors can do it, then they would have gone to hospitals. But that's why in medicine there are certain specialties with subspecialties, with experience, knowledge, board certification, is because everyone who's in a particular specialty has that expertise. So bones come to us because we have the experience of having looked at thousands of bones when we remove the flesh from the regular autopsies. I'm not only talking about a piece of bone. When we do a regular autopsy, we take a layer by layer dissection. We have to determine, we have to take x-rays, we have to look at the bones. Are the bones have injuries? If so, what type? So I honestly feel that's why we have this field of forensic pathology that was created in 1959. And even with board certification every year, they don't pass beyond 40% of the people who even take the exam, is because you're considered to have that expertise to look at and examine bones. So if you're asking asking me the question, yes, forensic pathologists and forensic anthropologists, they are the ones who have that expertise.
Now, that wasn't my question, whether you need that experience. My question was, does it take a certified forensic anthropologist to look at a picture and to compare it to something?
Judge, that wasn't the question. It was to look at bones, and she testified that it does take that expertise as a forensic pathologist.
The question was whether it takes a forensic pathologist to compare a picture to something.
The question that was asked of the witness that she responded to was, do you think it takes a certified forensic pathologist to do that?
And that would be to compare a picture to an injury or defect.
I'm reading
Okay, let me rephrase.
what you said, Mr.
I can rephrase.
That's what I'm saying. That's what you asked.
Would it take a certified pathologist to compare a picture from an article to an observation when we're talking about scratches and parallel lines? Is there some kind of special expertise that...
Well, anyone can do anything is possible. But how do you do with expertise? Yes, anyone can look at anything and say, just like you could see, was that a condom or was that a fold? You can see that. So, but anyone can, yes, look at and see once you have seen pictures. But we do a scientific examination. So can anyone look at one and look at another one and say it could be? Maybe, but that's not how we operate.
Okay, ma'am. So let me ask you a different hypothetical, and bear with me as I go through this. What about well, let me preface that with asking you this. Your testimony was that something that distinguishes you here to these ladies and gentlemen of the jury is that you've been invited to be a faculty member of the University of Hawaii John A. Burns Medical School. Would that be accurate? Would that be accurate?
I was not just invited to be, I had to I didn't have to apply, but I had to show my credentials in order to be a part-time associate professor.
Now, would you agree with me that you would not only consider it an honor, but you know that it would be that much more of a distinction if you were invited to join the faculty of Harvard Medical School, right?
I don't live in Boston.
Ma'am, that's not the question. The question is, you would consider it an honor and a distinction. I'm not asking if you would take the job. I'm asking you, wouldn't you consider that an honor and a special distinction to be invited to be a faculty member of Harvard Medical School?
Judge, objection that has no relevance at this point.
She was talking.
How do you compare?
How do you compare? You mentioned
I live in Hawaii and we have...
Have you never heard of Harvard Medical School?
I do, but I don't know what you're comparing.
Well, so Judge, there's no relevance to that question.
The question as asked is objectionable. I will sustain the objection. You may rephrase the question if you wish.
Let me ask you this. If someone with 30 plus years of emergency room experience as a surgeon, okay, who is Stanford educated medical school, who has been invited to be a faculty member at Stanford Medical School.
Judge, I object as this being called, the hypothetical is unfair. There's no, other than somebody is saying...
The objection is overruled. Let's proceed.
Someone who has been invited to be on the faculty of Stanford Medical School, invited to be on the faculty of Harvard Medical School, who has worked at two of the busiest emergency rooms in America, who has treated over 100,000 patients, who is a member of Phi Beta Kappa, who is a medical bioengineer with dozens of patents, who is a member of the American College of Forensic Medicine, a charter member, who, well, let's just go with that.
Okay.
Would you agree with me that someone with those credentials can look at a picture just as well as someone who has just gotten their PhD a year ago and make equally valid comparisons as the person with the PhD?
If you are, so an emergency room physician is a physician who treats patients who come to emergency rooms. So when you say, can that emergency room physician look at just a picture next to another picture, whether he is a Harvard on the faculty or Stanford faculty, versus anyone if you have one next to the other, without considering any scientific facts, just looking at scoring versus not scoring. I think you can do it, we can do it, everyone can, if that's what you're saying. However, you cannot compare forensic pathology to emergency room medicine. Yes, in a field where a doctor is in emergency, as an emergency physician who has all those credentials, I'm sure in comparison to other emergency room physicians, do they have expertise in what they do? I'm sure. But I can't answer that because we are comparing apples and oranges. I'm a forensic pathologist. I do a scientific examination of bones. Has that emergency physician seen hundreds and hundreds of cuts on the bones? No, they don't examine cut. When a patient comes to the emergency room, they have to quickly treat the patient to save their life. They're not going to be looking at bones. Whereas forensic pathologists, we have time, we have to examine bones. So I'm sorry, I can't agree with that.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. If you have a forensic anthropologist, okay, with absolutely no experience, you know, strike that. Let me move on. No, let me step back just a little bit, going back to your compensation. You testified that your hourly rate is $375, but haven't you charged $400 an hour before to this very court system?
So the state has a state and county has 375 because
You charge
private
defense
attorneys,
400.
no, not defense, private civil cases and any private 400, yes.
Okay, so you cut the state a break down
No,
to
it was an
75.
agreed upon thing because state and county system for the other islands.
Thank you.
You have testified that you have had experience with Boer at least in one or two cases. Is that accurate?
Yes.
I'm sorry, may I ask the court what exhibit the defense is on?
Yeah, I think your T would be the next.
I've shown what is marked and identified as defense exhibit U to the state.
So we have a T.
Yeah. We use T. May I approach the witness, John?
Yes.
Okay, doctor, if I could show you this picture, and if you could take a look at it and tell me if you recognize what's in that picture.
Yes.
Okay, can you, well, does that picture accurately reflect a picture of the type of Boer that you recall working a case, I guess in relation to?
I didn't have a picture of the exact mouth of the boar, but I have seen pictures and I see this picture, yes.
Okay. So would you agree with me that, well, I mean, does that picture accurately reflect the type of Boer that we'd be considering when thinking about Boer activity here in Hawaii?
Yes.
Okay, does that picture appear to be altered or distorted in any way?
No.
Okay, may I move into evidence, Your Honor? Let's mark as defense exhibit U.
Mr. Rivera.
No, no objection.
Okay, if I may approach the witness.
Yeah, but I,
actually, I'm gonna-
first, let me know for the record that defendant's exhibit U, marked for identification purposes, is received in evidence.
I'm showing the state what I have marked as defense exhibit V, which is a single photograph, which is an enlargement of U.
Can I see you again? You don't make coach to take the...
Yes.
May I approach with you, Your Honor?
Yes.
No, I'm sorry, V, I'm sorry.
I thought you wanted to approach with the...
Right, V.
you want to torch with you, you can. Which one do you want?
Maybe B. No, I think B's been, U's been admitted. If I could approach with B.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, doctor, if you could take a look at that picture and does that, and if you need the other one, I'm sorry, I can get that back to you, but does that look like a simple enlargement of what you just testified to relative what's in exhibit?
Yes.
Okay. Any, look like it's distorted or tampered with it?
No.
May I move what's marked as defense exhibit B?
Mr. Rivera?
No objection.
Defendant's Exhibit V, marked for identification purposes, is received in evidence.
Okay, with that, make sure. Let me ask you this. Just touching on your testimony regarding consultations, and that it sounded like, well, can you tell us, wouldn't you agree with me that there are times when, as a forensic pathologist, it would be not only important but imperative to speak with the treating physician of the person who you were examining, or the body that you were examining?
Only if there's an issue of a medical, a natural disease or a clinical process that we want to confirm with the physician, yes, we would.
I mean, it sounds to me like, if I'm not mistaken, that your testimony amounts to, hey, I'm the ME, I'm going to decide what happens, and I'm not going to consult anybody that, you know, well, actually, let me withdraw that. I mean, you'd agree with me that in your search for giving the dead a voice and for finding out what happened, you're not going to stop at certain resources if you have access to them, right? If you have someone who is you believe is a sage in the medical department, one of your mentors, who teaches medicine, you're not going to
Judge, objection. This is argumentative at this point.
remove that as one of your resources in helping you seek the truth, right?
Again, Judge, what that is
Objection
so.
is sustained. You may rephrase the question.
I have no further questions.
Redirect yourself.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, with respect to your compensation for your time, you're not getting paid $10,000, although you're board certified, are you?
No, I'm not.
And have you ever heard of the American College of Forensic Medicine?
No. I'm sure there are organizations that are not forensic pathologists but who call themselves forensic medicine, but the American board recognizes pathology, and also the National Association of Medical Examiners recognize American boards of pathology and forensic pathology.
And is that what you're a member of?
Yes.
Yeah, I have no further questions.
Ma'am, you agree with me that if you were getting compensated for 2 full days, as well as at least a half a day or maybe closer to a full day of travel, your compensation would be closer to $10,000 than $2,000, right?
Judge, objection. That is irrelevant in this matter.
It's directly relevant. That's the hypothetical he's posing, which is Dr. Offer.
The objection is overruled. You may answer the question.
So it depends on the time I spend testifying here. So if it is 1 day, 8 hours, from the time I get to the time I leave, then it's 2,400.
Ma'am, if you were to have to stay here overnight tonight, how much would that be?
It's the same thing,
You wouldn't get paid for tonight.
no?
So if you stay 2 days, right, that'd be, what, $4,000?
If I testify the second day,
Okay, and if you had spent time reviewing stuff before, that could go anywhere from $400 to thousands of dollars, right?
it depends, I only spent 2 hours on reviewing the material. There wasn't a lot of material.
No, that's you, but if someone spent more than
Chief,
2
an
hours,
objection if anyone else is irrelevant, what else, what
I
anyone
can't
else?
answer.
The objection is sustained.
Thank you.
if you spent more than 2 hours reviewing, you'd agree with me that your costs would be going up, right?
Yeah, depending on the time.
And if you added the time that it takes to travel as well as the expenses that it took to travel from the West Coast, you'd agree with me, you're getting closer to $10,000 than $2,000, right?
It depends on the time I spend, so I can't compare with someone else.
And do you know whether you're the first paid expert by the state, or the second, or
Objection,
third, or fourth
objection,
paid
that's
expert by
what-
the state?
Stop it. This is really unnecessary. It's not
Absolutely.
fair to anyone, including the
Well, When
jury.
he's yelling, I think I have.
Stop it. Stop it. Both of you. This isn't helping anyone.
No further questions.
All right, do you have any other questions? All right, there being no further questions. Are there any juror questions?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much. You are
Thank you.
excused. We'll take a recess at this time.
Thank you.